Welcome, history buffs. Get ready to delve into the chilling, true story behind the myth. Today, we're not talking about vampires, but about a real historical figure whose brutal actions earned him the terrifying name Dracula. Prepare yourself, because the truth is far more horrifying than any legend. The smell hit them first. 20,000 rotting bodies don't just assault your eyes. They invade every sense, making even hardened Ottoman soldiers vomit where they stood. Sultan Mehmed II, the man who conquered Constantinople itself, rode towards the Wallachian capital. He expected to find a city ready for battle. Instead, he found something that would haunt him forever: a forest, but not of trees. It was a forest of human beings impaled on stakes, their bodies in various stages of decay. Some were still twitching after days of agony. In the center, on the tallest stake, wearing ceremonial robes, was Hamza Pasha Mehmed's own general. In the next few minutes, you're going to discover the horrifying truth about the real Dracula. Medieval writers tried to hide evidence about a man so brutal, so creatively sadistic, that powerful conquerors fled at the sight of his work. But here's what makes this even more disturbing. This wasn't mythology or fiction. This was a real man who learned that a human body can survive on a stake for 3 full days if you're careful enough. I'm about to reveal exactly how he learned this skill and why a childhood spent in chains created the most terrifying ruler in European history. A childhood forged in cruelty. It was winter 1431 in Sighisoara, Transylvania. In a stone house marked with a dragon, a woman screamed in childbirth. The baby who came into the world that day would one day make 20,000 people scream far worse. They named him Vlad, after his father, but history would know him by the terrible thing he did best: impale human beings. His father, Vlad II, Dracul, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a Christian military group dedicated to defending Europe from Ottoman invasion. Dracul means dragon in Romanian. His son would be called Dracula, son of the dragon. But that wasn't the name that would strike terror across 2 continents. No, that name would come from his favorite method of execution. Think about the world this child was born into. The Ottoman Empire was expanding westward like a plague, and Christian kingdoms were falling one by one. Constantinople, the jewel of the Byzantine Empire that had stood for over 1,000 years, was about to fall. Between the Muslim Ottoman Empire and Christian Europe lay Wallachia, a small land that served as a bloody buffer zone. This is where young Vlad learned his first lessons about power. It came from fear, and fear came from pain. But to understand how a prince became a monster, we need to uncover the moment his childhood ended. And I warn you, what happened to an 11-year-old boy in an Ottoman fortress explains everything that followed. Sultan Murad II summoned Vlad Dracul for a diplomatic meeting. It was a trap, but Dracul had no choice. He brought his 2 youngest sons, 11-year-old Vlad and 7-year-old Radu. The moment they crossed into Ottoman territory, they were arrested. The Sultan offered Dracul a terrible deal. Leave your sons as hostages to guarantee your loyalty, or watch them die in front of you. What would you choose? Your freedom or your children? Dracul chose freedom. He rode away, leaving his sons in Ottoman hands. Vlad watched his father's figure disappear into the distance. It was the last moment of his childhood. The Ottoman court claimed they treated noble hostages while offering education in languages, philosophy, and military tactics. And for Radu, Vlad's beautiful younger brother, this was true. Radu thrived. He converted to Islam and became the Sultan's favorite. Some whispered he became more than that. But Vlad refused to bend. He spat at his Turkish tutors. He refused to learn the Quran. He attacked other hostages who insulted Christianity. For this defiance, he paid a price. The Turks had methods for breaking stubborn children, the falaka, beating the soles of the feet until they split open. The bastinado hanging upside down while guards struck the body with sticks. Starvation, isolation, darkness. But here's a detail historians often don't want you to know. During his captivity, Vlad was forced to watch something that would shape his future Ottoman executions, specifically impalements. The Turks used this for special enemies, those who deserved not just death, but days of public agony. Young Vlad watched as prisoners were forced to sit on oiled stakes, their own body weight slowly driving the wood through their insides. He saw how the stake had to be blunt, not sharp to avoid piercing vital organs too quickly. He learned that if you angled it correctly, the stake traveled alongside the spine, emerging through the shoulder or mouth, keeping the victim alive for days. He was 12 years old, watching people die by inches, memorizing every detail. The monster takes his throne. Meanwhile, back in Wallachia, everything fell apart. His father played all sides, Christians, Ottomans, Hungarians, trying to keep his throne. It didn't work. In 1447, Wallachian nobles, allied with Hungarian leader John Hunyadi, ambushed Vlad Dracul in the marshes near Baltini. They hacked him to pieces. But they saved something special for Vlad's older brother Mircea. The boyars' Wallachian nobles captured Mircea alive. First, they blinded him with hot irons. Then, while he was still screaming, still alive, they buried him. The man who should have been Vlad's protector died choking on dirt, clawing at the earth above him. When word reached the Ottoman court, 16-year-old Vlad received the news with strange calm. His captors expected tears, rage, something. Instead, he simply asked, "How long did my brother take to die underground?" The Ottomans didn't realize they were looking at a creature they had created. 6 years of torture hadn't broken Vlad. They had transformed him. Every beating, every humiliation, every forced viewing of impalement had been teaching him not how to submit, but how to inflict. The Ottomans decided Vlad might be useful. They released him with a small force to claim his father's throne. His first reign lasted 2 months before he was driven out. But those 2 months gave us a preview of what was coming. Even then, 17-year-old Vlad showed unusual cruelty. A merchant complained about theft. Vlad had the suspect's feet skinned and salt rubbed into the raw flesh. But this was just practice. The real horror was still brewing. For 8 years, Vlad served in various armies, learning the art of war. He fought alongside the man who killed his father John Hunyadi because revenge could wait, but knowledge could not. He studied fortifications, cavalry tactics, and psychological warfare. Most importantly, he built a network of supporters who shared his hatred of both Ottomans and treacherous boyars. Vlad's moment arrived with Hungarian support. He invaded Wallachia again. The current ruler, Vladislav II, met him in single combat. According to legend, Vlad didn't just kill him. He beheaded him, slowly sawing through the neck, while Vladislav was still alive. Now here's where the story takes a turn, from violent to genuinely monstrous. On Easter Sunday, 1457, Vlad invited hundreds of boyar families to a feast at his palace in Targoviste. These were the people who betrayed his father, who buried his brother alive. They came dressed in their finest clothes, believing the new prince wanted peace. The feast was magnificent. wine-flowed music played. Then Vlad stood and asked a simple question. How many princes have you seen rule Wallachia in your lifetime? The boyars, wine-drunk and honest, gave various answers. Some said 5, others 20. A few elderly nobles admitted to serving 30 different princes. Each admission was a confession they had survived by switching sides by betraying every ruler when convenient. Vlad nodded thoughtfully, then he gave a signal. Soldiers burst through every door. In minutes, hundreds of boyars were chained. Vlad ordered the old and infirm impaled on the spot in the courtyard where they could be seen from the feast hall. The screaming began immediately, but for the young and strong, he had different plans. Still in their Easter finery, they marched north to a ruined castle. For months they were forced to rebuild Poneri Castle, stone by stone. They worked until their fine clothes rotted off their bodies, then worked naked. When they collapsed, they were impaled. This was just the beginning. I've discovered documents that show what happened next, which shocked even medieval standards of cruelty. But first, if you're finding these hidden historical horrors as disturbing as I did, hit that subscribe button. I uncover the dark truths about history every week, and trust me, Vlad's story gets so much worse. Now let me tell you about the incident that gave him his infamous nickname, the Forest of the Impaled. In 1459, Brasov, a Saxon merchant city, had been harboring Vlad's enemies and rival claimants to the throne. Vlad sent a warning. The city ignored it. So Vlad brought 20,000 soldiers and showed them what happens when you ignore the dragon son. He didn't just attack the city. He transformed it into a gallery of horror, the Basilica Nigra. The Black Church gets its name from the fires Vlad set. But fire was merciful compared to what else he did. Men, women, children, all impaled in neat rows. Babies impaled on the same stake as their mothers, positioned at the breast as if nursing. Pregnant women with stakes driven through their wombs. But here's the part that separates Vlad from ordinary tyrants. He had a table set up in the middle of this forest of dying humans. Servants brought him a full meal, roasted meat, fresh bread, wine. Vlad sat and ate while surrounded by thousands of people in various stages of dying. The moaning, the screaming, the begging. It was dinner music to him. One of his boyars couldn't handle it. The man covered his nose against the stench of blood and evacuated bowels. Vlad noticed. "Does it stink to you?" he asked pleasantly. The boyar admitted it did. Vlad had him impaled on a stake twice as high as the others. "You'll be above the smell up there," he explained. Medieval writers record something else about this meal, something so disturbing that most historians skip over it. According to both German and Russian sources, Vlad dipped his bread in the blood pooling beneath the stakes. He developed a taste for it. Blood-soaked bread became his preferred meal during mass executions. The numbers alone are staggering. Conservative estimates put Vlad's death toll at 40,000. Others say 80,000. But in a principality with only 500,000 people, he may have killed 20% of his own population. That's proportionally more than Stalin or Pol Pot. But unlike those dictators, Vlad didn't delegate. He personally supervised, he innovated. You see, basic impalement wasn't enough for Vlad. He developed variation stakes through the mouth for liars, through the skull, for thieves driven in slowly with hammers so the victim lived longer. Women who committed adultery had stakes driven through their vaginas, emerging through their mouths. He impaled people upside down sideways in patterns that spelled out messages. Two things happened that pushed Vlad from cruel ruler to complete monster. First, he remarried. His first wife's name is lost to history, but we know he had to secure his succession. Second, Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II demanded tribute, not just gold, but 500 boys for the Janissary Corps children to be converted to Islam and trained as soldiers. Vlad's response: he sent the Sultan a message, "Come and get them yourself." When Ottoman envoys arrived to collect the tribute, they refused to remove their turbans in Vlad's presence, citing religious custom. Vlad congratulated them on their devotion. Then he had their turbans nailed to their skulls with 3-inch iron spikes. They were sent back to Constantinople, still alive, still wearing their holy headgear, now permanently attached. The Sultan sent an army led by Hamza Pasha. Vlad ambushed them at night, capturing thousands. Every single prisoner was impaled. But for Hamza Pasha, Vlad prepared something special. The general was castrated first, his genitals stuffed in his mouth. Then he was impaled on a gold-covered stake because even in torture rank must be respected. This brings us to 1462 and the event that would cement Vlad's reputation forever. Sultan Mehmed II, called the Conqueror, after taking Constantinople personally, led an army of 150,000 men into Wallachia. Some sources say 300,000. Vlad had maybe 30,000, including old men and boys. He couldn't win a direct battle, so he didn't fight directly. As the Ottoman army advanced, they found a wasteland. Vlad had burned every field, poisoned every well, evacuated every village. The Turks marched through ash and silence. But that wasn't the worst part. Vlad sent diseased prostitutes into the Ottoman camps. Men infected with plague infiltrated their ranks. The mighty Ottoman army began dying before any battle started. On June 17th, 1462, came the night attack. With a small force of his best cavalry, Vlad infiltrated the Ottoman camp under cover of darkness. The goal: assassinate Mehmed in his tent and end the invasion with one stroke. Vlad personally led the charge, cutting through guards searching for the Sultan's pavilion. But in the darkness and chaos, they hit the wrong tent. Instead of Mehmed, they found the Grand Vizier. The assassination failed. Vlad and his men barely escaped as the entire Ottoman camp mobilized. The next day, Mehmed continued toward Targovishte, Vlad's capital. The gates were open, no defenders on the walls. The Sultan suspected a trap, advancing carefully. Then they saw it. Wait before I describe the most horrific scene in military history. You need to understand the scale. For miles around the city, covering 7 acres, stood wooden stakes, 20,000 of them. And on each stake, a human being in various stages of death and decay, men, women, children, Turks captured in previous battles, Bulgarian Muslims who supported the Ottomans, Wallachian traitors. Some had been dead for weeks, their bodies black with rot crows picking at exposed flesh. Others impaled more recently still moved, still moaned. The arrangement was deliberate. The stakes were in concentric circles like a grotesque garden. The tallest stakes in the center held the highest-ranking victims. Hamza Pasha's gold stake glinted in the middle, his body long dead but still wearing ceremonial armor. The smell made hardened soldiers vomit. The sight made them weep. These were men who had conquered cities, who had seen Byzantine Constantinople fall. But this was beyond warfare. This was madness given form. The Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror. The man who ended the 1,000-year Byzantine Empire looked at this forest of the dead and spoke words that would echo through history. I cannot take the land of a man who does such things. What can one do against such a demon? He turned his army around. The man who never retreated, retreated. But here's the truly disturbing part. Vlad considered this his masterpiece. While Mehmed fled, Vlad walked among the stakes like an artist in his gallery. He adjusted bodies that had slipped. He noted which angles of impalement lasted longest. This wasn't just psychological warfare. This was pleasure. One captured Turkish chronicle often omitted from sanitized histories records that Vlad would visit the impalement fields at night alone. He would sit among the dying and listen to their moans like music. He would touch the stakes to feel the vibrations of struggling bodies. He would bring wine and toast the dying. This is who Vlad really was, not a patriot defending Christianity, not a harsh but necessary ruler, but a man who found joy in human suffering extended to its absolute limit, imprisonment and final horrors. The Ottomans left, but they left behind Vlad's brother Radu with troops. Remember beautiful Radu, the one who thrived in Ottoman captivity. He offered Wallachians a choice: support him and live in peace, or stick with the impaling madman. It wasn't a hard choice. Vlad's own nobles abandoned him. His army melted away. By August 1462, he was fleeing to Hungary, seeking help from King Matthias Corvinus. But Matthias had been in communication with the Ottomans. When Vlad arrived, he was arrested and imprisoned for 12 years. He rotted in Hungarian captivity. But even in prison, the sickness remained. Guards reported finding dead rats carefully impaled on splinters in Vlad's cell. Small birds skewered on sharpened quills. He created miniature impalement fields with insects pinned to pieces of wood. When asked why, he simply said he didn't want to lose his skill. Think about that, 12 years in a cell, and his primary concern was maintaining his technique for torturing living things. The guards were so disturbed they stopped bringing him anything that could be sharpened. Politics shifted. Hungary needed allies against the Ottomans again. Vlad was released, even given a Hungarian noble bride. He converted to Catholicism, a political move, and received troops to reclaim Wallachia. His third reign began in 1476. He was older now, in his 40s, but the cruelty hadn't aged. If anything, imprisonment had made it worse. The impalements resumed immediately. But now he added psychological torture. He forced families to watch each other being impaled and ordered children first, then mothers, then fathers. He developed a method of impaling that kept victims alive for up to a week. One story from this period is so grotesque that even contemporary writers hesitated to record it. A group of Turkish prisoners were brought before Vlad. He had them impaled in a specific pattern, shorter stakes in front, taller behind, creating an amphitheater of agony. In the center, he had a pregnant woman impaled vertically. As she died over hours, she gave birth on the stake. The baby, of course, died immediately. Vlad watched the entire process, taking notes on how long each stage took. This was not warfare. This was not even madness. This was evil so pure it defies comprehension. The end and a disturbing legacy. In December 1476, Vlad was marching with a small force when he was ambushed by Ottoman troops. The details vary. Some say he was assassinated by his own men, tired of serving a monster. Others say the Turks overwhelmed him. What we know is this: Vlad the Impaler died in battle, his head severed from his body. The Turks took his head to Constantinople, where Sultan Mehmed II had it displayed on a stake above the city gates. There's poetry in that the Impaler finally impaled, if only in death. His body is supposedly buried at Snagov Monastery, but when archaeologists opened his supposed tomb in 1931, they found it empty. Some say monks horrified by burying such evil moved the body. Others whispered darker theories. But Vlad's death doesn't end his story. You might think I'm about to talk about Bram Stoker and vampire legends. I'm not, because the real horror of Vlad's legacy isn't fiction, it's fact. In Romania today, Vlad is considered a national hero. Yes, you heard that correctly. The man who murdered 80,000 people, who dined on blood-soaked bread while watching children die on stakes, who impaled babies to their mother's breasts, this man has statues. His face is on tourist merchandise. Romanian nationalists praise him as a defender of Christianity, a bulwark against Islamic invasion. They focus on his resistance to the Ottomans and ignore the screaming forests of the dead. They celebrate his harsh justice. He supposedly made Wallachia so safe that a golden cup could be left at a public fountain without being stolen. They don't mention that safety came from terror so absolute that people were afraid to breathe wrong. This is the real horror, not that monsters exist, but that we rehabilitate them, that we find ways to excuse the inexcusable, because the monster was on our side. Vlad didn't impale 20,000 Turks because he was defending Christianity. He impaled them because he enjoyed it. He impaled Christians too. He impaled anyone who gave him an excuse, and when he ran out of excuses, he made them up. Medieval rulers were brutal by necessity, but Vlad was brutal by choice, by preference, by pleasure. Other rulers of his time used execution as a tool. Vlad used it as entertainment. Other rulers killed enemies. Vlad killed randomly merchants who looked at him wrong, women who cooked meals he didn't like, children who cried too loud. He once impaled a group of foreign ambassadors for being too well dressed, saying their finery insulted Wallachian simplicity. The German tales speak of Vlad encountering a peasant with a torn shirt. He asks if the man has a wife. Yes, the peasant says. Vlad has the wife impaled for not properly caring for her husband's clothing. Then he gives the man a new wife with a warning, keep your husband better dressed or join your predecessor. This wasn't justice. This was a man so damaged by childhood trauma, so twisted by years of watching Ottoman cruelty, that he became worse than his tormentors. The Ottomans impaled enemies. Vlad impaled everyone. The Ottomans used torture for information or punishment. Vlad used it for pleasure. Modern psychologists studying historical records classify Vlad as a sadistic psychopath with probable sexual dysfunction. Many of his specific impalement methods targeted sexual organs. His childhood trauma, his forced observation of torture, his powerlessness as a hostage. These are classic serial killer developments, except this serial killer had an army and a country. But perhaps the most chilling detail comes from those who knew him personally. They describe a man who was cultured, intelligent, even charming when he chose. He spoke multiple languages, wrote poetry, understood theology and philosophy. He wasn't a mindless brute. He was worse. A brilliant mind that chose to use its gifts for creating the most exquisite suffering possible. Russian chronicles describe foreign merchants visiting Vlad's court. He treats them well, shows them hospitality. Then as they're leaving, he mentions casually that he had their servants impaled while they dined just to see if they'd notice. They didn't. He laughs and lets them discover the bodies on their way out. This is what true evil looks like, not raving madness, but calm, calculated cruelty delivered with a smile. In his final letter, written days before his death, Vlad complains that his Hungarian allies don't let him impale as freely as he'd like. Even facing a massive Ottoman invasion, his main concern is that he can't torture enough people. That's who Vlad really was, a man so addicted to human suffering that limiting his torture quota was worse than military defeat. When that Turkish sword finally took his head, it wasn't killing a defender of Christendom. It was exterminating a rabid animal that happened to wear a crown. The real Dracula didn't fear crosses or sunlight. He didn't drain blood with fangs. He did something worse. He proved that, with enough childhood trauma and unchecked power, a human being can become more monstrous than any myth. He showed us that the worst horrors don't come from supernatural creatures, but from damaged humans given the opportunity to spread their damage. 20,000 corpses rotting on stakes, babies dying on their mother's breasts, children forced to watch parents impaled in order, pregnant women giving birth while dying on poles. This isn't legend. This isn't exaggeration. This is history recorded by multiple sources from multiple nations, all painting the same picture of evil incarnate. But here's the final, most disturbing truth about Vlad the Impaler he won. His terror tactics worked. The Ottomans hesitated to invade Wallachia for years after his death. His name became a curse that Turkish mothers used to frighten children. Behave or Kazukla Voivode will get you, the Impaler Prince. A man so terrible that even conquering armies turned back rather than face what he might do. And somewhere in that blood-soaked ground of Wallachia in the earth that absorbed the bodily fluids of 80,000 impaled victims, something dark took root. Not vampirism. Reality doesn't need supernatural embellishment, but the idea that ultimate cruelty equals ultimate power. That fear is stronger than any army. That a single twisted individual can make empires retreat through sheer willingness to do what others won't. Vlad the Impaler didn't just kill people. He killed the idea that humans have limits to their cruelty. He proved that with enough trauma and power, anyone can become a devil. And he proved that sometimes devils win. The forest of corpses outside Târgoviște wasn't just a war crime. It was a mission statement. It said, this is what a human being is capable of. This is what I am capable of, and I enjoy it. Mehmed the Conqueror, who had seen cities burn and empires fall, looked at that forest and saw something that conquering couldn't fix, something that winning couldn't cure. He saw the face of human evil stripped of all pretense, all justification, all humanity, and he ran. We should all run from men like Vlad, but instead we put their faces on coins and call them heroes. We focus on their victories and ignore their victims. We pretend their ends justified their means. They didn't. They never do. And until we stop making heroes of monsters, we'll keep creating more Vlads, more forests of the impaled, more proof that the real Dracula doesn't need fangs, just power and a damaged soul. Vlad III died in winter 1476, his head decorating a Turkish spike. But his legacy that humans can surpass any fictional monster in cruelty lives forever. Every dictator who uses terror, every killer who finds pleasure in pain, every damaged child who grows up to damage others, they're all children of Vlad the Impaler, the man who made hell on earth and called it justice. If Vlad's level of sadistic cruelty shocked you, wait until you discover what Gilles de Rais did to hundreds of children in his castle, murders so horrific they make Vlad look merciful. Subscribe for more suppressed historical truths, and I'll see you in the next investigation.